Hello, everyone. Welcome to the live webinar brought to you by Printing Impressions and Implant Impressions. My name is Tony McQuilkin, Senior Editor at Printing United Alliance, and I'll be your host for today's event, Postal Savings to Profit, Boosting Your Bottom Line, sponsored by Ricoh. Before we get started, I wanted to bring up this quick slide about Printing United Alliance, our parent organization. We're proud to offer a variety of resources to support professionals like you, whether through training programs, certifications, or opportunities to connect with the broader print community. Today's webinar is just one example of how we're here to help you stay informed and ahead in the industry. If you're not already a member, consider joining to take full advantage of all the resources available. For more details, scan the QR code below or click on the Alliance widget on your console. And speaking of your console, let me also take a second to point out the Resources widget at the bottom of the console. Looks like an open book. If you missed the Tech Tips video we played leading up to the webinar, you can always click on this widget for more information on how to use your console and access other webinar resources, such as today's slides. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, feel free to give a heart or a thumbs up on the Reactions widget. Looks like a smiley face. Here today to discuss postal trends and how to transform your mail operations into a profit center, we have Heather Willovit, the Principal Consultant Advisory Services at Ricoh. She brings a long history in the industry with a wealth of experience in mailing and postal trends, and she's going to bring all of that knowledge to you today. A few of the topics that we'll be covering include an overview of the current trends facing the mail industry, assessing your postal efficiency with the Mailer Scorecard, postal cost reduction strategies, and more. Start submitting your questions in the chat box now, and we'll be jumping in to answer as many of them as we can at the end. Heather, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to reviewing everything today with everyone on the call. So as Tony mentioned, I'm Heather Willovit, Principal Consultant for Ricoh and Advisory Services. My main goal at Ricoh is to do assessments for customers, and they range from mail assessments, which we're going to be going through and talking about a lot of mail and postal today. But we also do a variety of assessments, right? We do composition assessments, we do assessments for organizations, change management. We do a variety of strategic planning assessments, and many, many more kind of combined together, including that with workflow. I also run the disaster recovery program for Ricoh. So today, boosting savings, postal savings to profit, boosting your bottom line is kind of what we're going to go through today. And if we go into the agenda, I'm kind of going to review some of the current trends and challenges that we see today in the mailing industry. We're going to talk a little bit about the Postal Scorecard and how that can make mailers more efficient. I think some of the misconceptions is that you really don't need to look at it if you're not getting dinged or assessed, but there's a lot of good information in there, and we'll get into that a little bit. We'll go into some postal cost reduction strategies that I think a lot of you may or may not be paying attention to as you do a lot of your mailings. Some address quality improvement, and then mail production optimization. So as we start getting underway, we'll get into some of the trends. And then I'm going to explore different areas that we show some practical examples of these trends. But some of the main trends that we're seeing in the industry today is a lot of digital integration. And if you follow the postal promotions and you looked at what's available for 2026, you'll see how a lot of that digital integration is really starting to come to light, right? And we can use things like ChatGPT now, and we can copy and paste right into, a promotion using that ChatGPT or any one of your lovely engines that we can use, like Claude and so on and so forth. And we can actually apply for a postal promotion that way. So we're kind of seeing a lot of that digital integration start to cross into our mail and then what's available in those promotions. A lot of enhanced personalization, dynamic content that's changing for the audience. Sustainability has always been there, but obviously the focus is growing with more carbon neutral mailing programs like the FSC certified stocks and such. Just got to put that logo on there, and then that's also another 1% for the promotion. Measurability, like tools like Acrylics, right? So if you've never heard of Acrylics, we can kind of get a little bit into that, but those are tools that basically follow that customer journey, right? So where did that customer end up purchasing, right? They went and they saw one thing and they moved to the next, and then they moved to the next, and then they bought it somewhere else. But following that customer all along that journey. Compliance and privacy is very big, obviously, and that's because of the pieces that you may be sending out, right? So it is a very important part of what we help our customers with, and a lot of that has to do with closing that loop. And then automations and efficiencies. We're seeing a lot in the areas of sorting technologies, in predictive analytics, which we use quite a bit in the consulting group. And then obviously the uses of like informed delivery and such. So let's get into some examples here. I'm not going to go through each and every one of these trends because you can see for yourself and you will have access to the presentation. But one thing that I want to point out is automation efficiency. And you'll see that here. And the reason I want to point that one out is because digital integration obviously has a 3% integrated technology promotion that's continuing from last year to this year. That's a great one. We all know those unique QR codes are a great way to engage the customers. But at the end of the day, I think where a lot of our customers are really looking and trending more towards is in the automation efficiency, right? How do we time the things that we send, right? And what does that really mean to our buying power for our customers, right? So being able to automatically trigger that and push that into optimal delivery timeframes really does result in a return on investment for the buyer, right? And for the seller. So that kind of also helps the response rates. And so we're seeing a lot in this automation efficiency and using those tools to help that. Sustainability, again, another one, big focus. And I recently helped a customer that was doing that through a type of ink, algae-based ink, and also hemp paper and packaging. So lots of new materials that we're seeing in the marketplace today. Ricoh has a lot of good technology as well that produces the work on these types of materials. But that's growing and growing. And I think that that sustainability focus is going to continue to emerge. As I mentioned, compliance and privacy is a big one, right? That preference management and a link to kind of bringing customers into those portals. So when you pay your bills today, you can quickly click on a QR code and be able to take that straight to a payment. So those EBPP connectivity to pieces are very key. It's a great strategy, obviously, for quicker payment. And then the measurability, right? We do help our customers with kind of consumer QR codes to be able to provide that buyer with exactly what they want to see when they want to see it, and that purchasing power to be able to be relevant with the audience. So that measurability is key. And it's easier also to be able to use that conversion and to be able to calculate that true ROI with that. So we're going to get into a little bit around kind of the scorecard, right? And a lot of you may view your scorecard. You may be in there on the 11th of every month, looking at the previous month, taking a look at all of the different areas that you participate in. And that's great. But if you're not, this is really key to what you can see when you get into the scorecard. So where's it located? Obviously, it's located in your Business Customer Gateway. And you would have to have access to that. So if your organization had signed up for a MID, you may not. But if you do, you can get in through mailing reports. And the scorecard is a great way to look at everything based on the MID, right? So whether you're mailing on behalf of or other individuals are using it within the organization, right? You can also see if you're outsourcing it and they're using your mid, right? So if they're using a mid that is with an outsourced provider, you'll see the outsourced provider's mid, and then you'll see your mid underneath that. And that's a great way to also keep track of everything that's being sent and keep track of your outsourced providers, right? What they're doing, what's actually going into the pieces they're sending, and then obviously seeing what the returns would be, right? Or any assessments in there. So it's a report card. It's an early warning system, right? There are tools like Window Books, Your Score, I believe it's called, which will monitor this for you automatically. You know, you do not need to go in here every single month and look, or every month to 2 months and take a look at it. It will provide you with an automatic email that allows you to see a red, a yellow, a green. And again, you can just look when you need to. So that's great because it may kind of keep you optimized without having you to continuously look in there. So what's in here? You know, what do we see? One of the biggest things that I like to look at is the reports, right? How do we pinpoint any specific problems that we see inside the scorecard? You know, where do we look? And then the transparency on evaluating the mailings, right? This is how the USPS is looking at all of the mailings. Another area that I like is the historical performance, right? The data to track the improvements over time. So if you have made a change, you can actually see that through the scorecard, right? So if there's been some assessments, let's say the COAs, right? Over the course of time, you can look to see those improvements. And so that's actionable, which is great. Just kind of a quick, and I know this is tiny, but what we see along with issues with the quantity of mail pieces that were processed a little differently, sometimes we'll see that, you know, customers are processing smaller mailings through like Postal Wizard. So they're not going through maybe their cleansing software. They're not using the tools to basically run through that same process that they do on larger. And then they're not getting the discounts, right? We want to keep all of our mailings kind of consolidated, right? We don't want to take those smaller mailings and send them separately, which oftentimes we would do that. And those pieces are kind of forfeited, right, for the full service discount. So, you know, procedures should be put in place to capture those jobs. But what you're seeing in here is really just a sampling of the scorecard, right? And you're also seeing that they kind of got an assessment down in here. So they were, and they'll just take this right from the account. They don't need to tell you. But, you know, you will see that a lot of times these can be mitigated very easily with reviewing the scorecard, but also running through the more formalized processes. So let's get into some best practices for optimizing, right? We want to make sure that everybody in the staff that you have doing any mailings is trained properly. That's one of the issues that we see oftentimes is maybe a first shift versus a second shift, right? It's oftentimes there is not a good SOP in place. So a lot of times we'll find that it is a people issue. They don't know how to use the software as well, right? Again, you know, being able to train that staff equally and consistently, but also keep updating those trainings, making sure that they have the appropriate resources to be able to get the information that they need is really key. Updating the software. I find all too often our customers do not update their software, whether it's managed by IT or you're managing it, or you've changed your computers and there's some extras that haven't been installed, or you're not using the stuff that you have. That is key. As a consultant, that's the first thing that I start to look at is what do you have, what have you purchased, and what are you not using? Because oftentimes it's really just a matter of getting better training and understanding those tools. In addition to that, mail piece design is a big one, right? Being able to look at the way mail pieces are designed, whether you're consulting with your customer or whether you're designing the pieces yourself, right? Being able to look at those mail pieces. I am a mail piece design professional, and when I got certified, I looked at the pieces very differently. So that's a big one. You know, if you've got people on staff that are doing a lot of design, get them certified. Get mail piece design certification, because it is important for you to be able to note, hey, this is the way it should look, but also how is it going to affect when things get returned? When that yellow Nixie sticker gets placed on it, is it covering my IMV, as an example? Quality control is a big one. We see all too often that each department runs a bit as a silo. Let that quality control run from department to department throughout. Let that be a checks and balances that carries that piece from upstream in composition all the way down to the mail journey. Regular USPS consults, right? Being able to know, I find that the most valuable mail and printing and mail shops actually have regular USPS consultations, right? They've got a good person that they work with, and they've got good people internally that understand it. And then address hygiene is a big one. Now, some of the challenges is you do not own the data, right? So we find that if data is coming in from other sources and you're cleansing it after the fact, right? So they're cleansing potentially, then you're cleansing, you may be better off. And then giving them back that list to be able to say, do you want this mailed? Some places, some verticals must mail. They must mail it based on what they're sending. However, if they say they're cleansing it and you don't cleanse it, but you tick the box to say you're cleansing it because you believe they cleansed it, this is a problem, right? Because you are the mailer. And even if you are mailing on behalf of someone, you are taking discounts for that cleansing, right? So you do not want to tick that box unless you're actually doing it as well. Regular equipment maintenance. This is a big one, right? If we don't have redundancy in the equipment maintenance, then we are going to potentially have issues when we have the larger volume mailings, right? So we want to make sure that that we do regular equipment maintenance. Here's some strategies, and I have an example that's very, very basic on the next slide, but here's some strategies on what my customers, or if I'm consulting in a mail assessment, what we normally look at. Pre-sorting, obviously, right? So that's a big one. Customers do need to have thresholds met, but many do. I mean, they're not huge, right? It's for marketing 200 pieces, for standard it's 500 pieces in the zip. So it is usually easy to meet those thresholds. But we want to make sure that we're always moving towards that, trying to move towards that 5-digit. And sometimes, even though we like to say to our customers, keep it in-house, run it yourself, it doesn't make sense depending on the size and the scale. Outsourcing some of this, commingling houses does oftentimes make sense, especially for smaller mailers. Optimizing that packaging, right? Because we all know that in the last 5 years, what has grown? The Amazon truck is always on my block. I don't know about yours, but packaging is big, right? And so we want to optimize that packaging. Consider marketing mail. If there's no time limit, but there's also a kind of an offer, you have to weigh that out, right? So if you've got a timed offer, you want to be careful. Marketing mail takes longer, right? But it is cheaper, right? Formerly standard mail. Sometimes we want to look at that. We want to do the ROI around it, depending on what we're sending and when we're sending it. Address validation. The key to this is understanding how these softwares work. Again, sometimes we're not even using all the different features that are inside of this. So ensuring that not only do you have it and you implement it and your people are trained on it, but you understand what's in it and that process, right? And then the key to that is automating that process. Don't do it the same again and again and again. There are tools that automate that redundancy in that workflow. You're continuing to do the same thing over and over. Get tools that automate a lot of that, because there is. And then householding, when possible. I think I must have gotten 4 different pieces from driveway finance for my son, to him, to me, to everyone in my household. Why is driveway finance sending out all of the same letters to me for my son's car loan? Makes no sense, right? They're getting it to the same house. Householding is key. Putting it into that single, sending it one time. We're both on that loan. So making sure that that data is updated. Just an example, obviously the assumptions would be, 400 letter size mail pieces, right? So number 10s, each piece weighs about an ounce here. All pieces meet automation requirements and their standard letter dimensions, right? So gives you an understanding of a very, very, low volume, low pieces. But at the end of the day, it shows you that there is a savings here. And a lot of customers don't really think about this when they're sending first class versus marketing mail. Now, in addition to this, there can be an integrated technology promotion to this, right? So you can gain the 3% in a marketing piece that essentially could also have a driver to make an offer, right? So use some of that when you consult with your customers to be able to maximize the savings and use a lot of what we have in our toolbox for the postal promotions. I can't tell you how many times customers do not take advantage of postal promotions, and it's money left on the table, as well as the growth incentive. I mean, I don't know if anyone is up to date on that growth incentive, but I love it. And I talk about it all the time. Why? Because it's year over year, that growth incentive. The growth that you grow, you're leaving that money. You're not, the rates are just going to continue to rise. So what's the 3 areas to ensure mail deliverability and to qualify for postal discounts? Standardization, really big. Making sure formatting and your addressing comply with everything. That's that mail piece design, right? Going back to the way things should look, right? Abbreviations, punctuation, everything that goes along with that. Correction, identifying and fixing the errors in the addressing, right? So you're getting a lot of different lists. What's your process for standardization, correction, and data enrichment? What is the process? What's the standardized operating procedure for these 3 areas? Key, really key, because I see that oftentimes one of these goes missing, and it really doesn't need to. It should be standardized. You should have a process that goes through each piece of this for everything that you're doing in the lists. NCOA helps you find where people have gone when they move, while CAS ensures the addresses you have correctly formatted and deliverable, right? So we want to make sure we're doing, obviously, the NCOA, and we're doing CAS as well. So here's just an example, of what we're talking about here, right? And so you can kind of see that, on the left-hand side, we show an example, and then on the right, we show exactly what it should look like. Now, are these wrong? No, but they're also not correct. So I know that sounds like a bit of a duplication, but in a way, if you standardize, this is always going to be deliverable. Why? Because if you look over here, right, we've got a couple of different ways where now this sometimes up in the upper one, this goes and the delivery doesn't go direct to the suite. So it may get to Stone, but it won't get to the suite, right? So that's really what's key, right? Is being able to kind of consolidate all this information in a way that is easily read and that is basically going to get delivered with, what are we missing? The 4 at the end, right? So oftentimes, for some reason, a lot of the mail pieces will leave that out. Don't. Right? It's important to have that on the end. And on top of it, 70% of addresses must be processed through an approved move update method. In general, you must process all of them, but if you don't do at least 70%, you're losing big time. Okay? It's non-compliant and you lost your discounts. So why do that, right? We want to make sure that we've got everything that we need into our address standardization. Geocoding is another one, right? Assigning that geographic, you know, coordinate. So as I just mentioned, you know, CAS certification software, right? That coding accuracy and support system, you know, that certified address validation software, making sure that everything has that address verification component, including that zip+4, right? Automating that processing to standardize those addresses are key, and then implementing NCOA link. But with that, there's ANTLink, ANK, which is if you're doing NCOA link, you can add that additionally on to that. So really take a look at what's available to you. And this NCOA link is pennies. I mean, really, if you think about it, for 1,000 addresses, I think it's like $1 and change or something. I mean, it's so cheap to be able to do that. And in addition, obviously, there are a lot of third-party softwares that you can also do. Making sure that your mailing lists are processed every 95 days to be move update compliant, okay? Especially if you're doing it and you're not relying on a provider. Creating automated workflows, as I mentioned, is key, right? Making sure that you use these often to make sure your databases are updated and not decaying. I mean, we're going to kind of go through this a little bit deeper in the next one, but, you know, again, really important in regards to the last one, right? ARS, those address resolution services, processing for, you know, the DPV verification, right? Delivery point verification. Using that pre-sort software optimizes, obviously, everything for postal discounts, but understanding what those discounts are, right? Making sure that you know and you are up to date on what you can get, what you're going to get based on those discounts. So not only just based on what your rates are, everyone should know exactly where their rates are going to allow them for better margin, but also some of the stuff that you can get back, right? With the promotions. The commingling is a big one, right? Being able to kind of build those volumes with other volumes for the optimal discounts, whether you're outsourcing that and getting some pennies back, because obviously the commingling houses will take most of that, or you are you know, doing it yourself, combining. So if there isn't a time sensitive product, hold that mailing back a day or two. Wait so that you have bigger mailings to be able to aggregate it better. And then obviously set up logistics for drop shipping. That's a big one, right? We find that a lot of our customers that are larger mailers have strategically placed locations. So that's a big one. Being able to look at how much closer you can get to the you know, the network of distribution centers for better time frame, right? So for better delivery. We kind of went through this, right? But what can help with these processes is a lot of the Six Sigma charts. I am Green Belt Six Sigma certified. If after anyone would like, you know, we can, you know, certainly get some information from folks. But if you are interested in some of these charts, or you're Six Sigma yourself, charts like the fishbone diagram, charts like, you know, the control charts inside of the Six Sigma. You know, there's some really good ones that help standardize and set up processes for doing all of these procedures, right? Being able to develop that quality control, but what's more important, what's Six Sigma built on, right? Continuous improvement, constantly looking at how to continuously improve on this. That's where it's key, right? Don't just put it in place. How are you always improving on it? That's the whole thing with Six Sigma, right? So being able to look at what the process is today and how it's continuously improving. Leveraging IMBs. This is a big one. I don't see enough people using it, and I'm not really sure why. There is great software to simplify this. You know, you should have them on every mailing. You know, I don't really know why, unless someone's sending out such a low volume of mail that you're literally putting a stamp on it. I also see a lot of people just metering mail. Why are you doing that? Why are you just metering the mail? If you've got the volume, you shouldn't just be metering mail. I mean, you do get a discount. I'm not going to lie. It's not like a forever stamp. But at the end of the day, depending on your thresholds and what you're doing, you're leaving money. You're leaving money on the table. And these IMBs are great, right? They have specific codes for different mail types, for your reply mail, service identifiers, class of mail, your mailer ID. Serial numbers should be, sequential, right? To follow your internal tracking system. For example, if you're running a campaign or a promotion or an A/B test variance, it would be in that tracking, right? Why not go back and being able to look at what you've done through these codes? We don't see them used enough. I don't see them used enough. And in large scale mailers, there is absolutely no reason why you shouldn't be using them. So that's always a frustration on my behalf, but it really helps you identify and analyze all of the performance of all of your mailings, right? And then you can take that information, that data back, and you can glean so much out of it, right? So I really like to say that these are your tools, leveraging the IMB mail barcodes to be able to maximize your mailings, right? Delivery point zip use, 11 digits, zip +4 +2 for max discounts. So we're going to get a little bit into, some of the mail production optimizations, along with obviously everything that we've talked about here. Here's just some key takeaways that I like to talk to customers about. Now, remember, when we're looking at all of this stuff, sometimes a lot of this, it starts further upstream than we have control over, right? So we want to make sure that we are informing and educating our customer, right? Because that is key. Now, some of these databases you can even get, deceased, you can get prison, you can get do not mail, you can get, different strategies so that you can allow for a lot less mailings to go out that don't need to, that will just be returned. Now, along with this, what is the procedure for return mail? Many customers do not have good procedures for return mail. The departments are handling them. Why? Why would you have labor? You pay the most for labor in an organization. Why do you have labor handling? Also, Ricoh has a great program, RMMS program, which actually will help you with return mail, and you need to do nothing. So there are so many procedures and processes in place that you can help. You can have it be pushed to a department that just gets handled through return mail, right? You don't need to, and it can be right in the barcode. You don't need to handle it. It shouldn't go back to your departments and being handled that way either, right? You should have a centralized return mail repository that oftentimes I don't see happening. But what also happens when you don't have a good return mail policy in an organization is you don't get paid, because if the payments are coming back and they've never been delivered, the statement's never been delivered, you're not getting paid. So it is behoove an organization to not have a good return mail policy in place. And we can help you with that. Set up systems to collect and analyze your undeliverable mail. It is ridiculous that I see this time and time again. And there's buckets of it oftentimes. This is the backbone of an organization. There's no reason to not have this optimized in that organization. Or if you're a service bureau and a mailer, then you need to educate, and you can also help your customers with this for a little, extra money. So that's a service that you could be providing. Training, right? This is a big one. We do not train our staff enough. These processes are integral to making money. The more we keep our staff uninformed, or they don't have the tools they need to do the jobs efficiently, we are losing money as an organization. This is key. We do not want to do that, right? So we need to establish good training. We need to make sure that the folks understand the promotions that are working in our design departments. We want to make sure that we keep our customers informed on that. And we also want to make sure that any tools that we have, that we are ensured our staff, first shift, second shift, third shift, are all trained equally, right? We don't need to have the third shift be a stepchild. They need to have just as much information as the first shift does, okay? There are so many postal user groups that we can get involved in, right? We can talk about MTAC. We can talk about PCC, which is the Postal Customer Council. There's the annual National Postal Forum. Send your staff to this. Let them get the information firsthand and know what's coming down the pike, right? Postcom, right? That's for Postal Commerce. MSMA, which is the Mail Systems Management Association. DMA, the Data and Direct Marketing Association. There are specialized groups that, are even for specific, verticals, right? We've got a great new catalog promotion coming out. Well, if you do catalogs for 2025-26, I believe they just launched that one, the catalog promotion. The Catalog and Multi-Channel Association is a big one. The Magazine Publisher Postal Coalition is a big one. And then there's the working groups like the USPS Mailer Scorecard Advisory Group. This goes on and on and on, right? So we continue to see that you don't inform and educate, and then we kind of keep doing the same thing again and again, right? We lose that money. We don't have the right established KPIs in place. And we don't regularly benchmark the performance to know that we are continuously improving. So here's a big one that I find that equipment is really where we need to focus a lot of attention. They can be very complex, a lot of these pieces of equipment. Software can be as well, so not taking that out of the picture here, but more importantly, equipment needs to be right-sized, right? If we're doing a certain number of volume on a desktop inserter, we are not getting the most out of our people and out of our processing time, right? We also need to understand how our operators are using this equipment. Are they spending 2 hours in the morning with their procedures and processes? Productivity time? I don't think that's probably the best, right? So we find that they can be getting back so much more productivity if we understand our equipment, right? Being able to say, let's look at everything that we have on the floor. We've got great services for this in advisory services group, which we help customers optimize their environments, not only from a perspective of right sizing, but where are things located? Are we having them carry stuff around across a floor to another room? I find that the print and mail centers are on the other side of the buildings. They should really be next door to one another or integrated into one room. Really, that's key, right? Map that complete production flow before selecting any equipment. I'm a consultant, I'm not a salesperson. When I'm looking at these environments, the first thing I usually notice is there's people dragging stuff all over the place. There's a different hat you wear when you see things from the outside. Get that consultant involved. Let them look at that environment. Let them see the way it works today. Don't use your internal people. They work how they work. They work in their silos. Get someone from the outside to map that out for you. Make sure that your volume matches the equipment capacity. All too often, we are not matching this volume to the capacity. And don't do it on only your daily volume. Do it on your spikes. Do it on where that volume hits to the top tier of your spike. That's your growth volume. You want to always try to get to that volume, right? So that's where you should be right sizing. Most people do it on their daily capacity, which really is not, isn't where I would say is your peak, right? So we want to measure that peak with your average volume, okay? And then implement that maintenance program, making sure that that production equipment isn't only serviced when you need it, right? Making sure, and I say this for printers, I say this for inserters, I say this for everything, making sure that that equipment is serviced at regular intervals, not only when you need a PM, Okay. And that's pretty much the end. I know I'm a little 5 minutes. I figured let us get some questions going, if we want in the chat, and just give you enough time to ask. Thank you for paying attention. And I look forward to working with all of you.
And I mean, we've covered a lot of ground today. That's a lot.
We did.
You kind of sped through. So absolutely, as Heather mentioned, we're going to take questions from the audience. So make sure to submit your questions in the chat box. And if we can't get to them on the live webinar today, then we will make sure someone follows up with you once the webinar is over. So I guess kind of to get started, what is the biggest misconception that printers have today about postal operations?
Yeah, that's a good one. So I think the biggest misconception that we have today, if I had to put it into one thing, it's that all pieces are treated equally, and they're not, right? So the reality is, and I see Scott, you have a question there, and I'm going to answer that right after this, is that they are not. So design specifications, right? That's big, right? So that impacts postal processing. Paper weight. Size, that affects delivery performance. Address quality determines processing success, right? If I were to think of another, it would be, going beyond the standards of basic mailing requirements, right? So, mailing is a specialized discipline, right? It is not just a add-on for printing, right? And I think the most successful folks that do this take it as a dedicated expertise, right? And those are the ones that really find that they're maximizing everything in regards to that. So question from Scott here, which is, I think a good one, is where do you get the mail piece design certification? And that you get through the USPS. So it is, funny enough, using a standard, the little bubble test that you got to do. It's 100 questions. They've got it online. You have to pay for the test. And so I forget what the fee is. Ricoh was kind enough to pay that fee for me. And then I will be honest with you, I failed it the first time. I thought it was so easy. I kind of breezed through a lot of this, and I really didn't. I'm admitting this to the group here. You got to get an 80. I got a 79. But at the end of the day, it is very comprehensive, and I learned tremendous amount. It goes for 2 years, and then you have to recertify again.
So I guess one person was asking, is there any way to dispute the Mailer Scorecard? Because we did talk a lot about the Mailer Scorecard.
Yeah. There is. So you can dispute the Mailer Scorecard, but, it is tough, and they'll take the money first. If you're getting, they're not waiting, but you can put a dispute in through your local, through you can put a dispute in online. You could go, your local USPS and go that route. But look, there's assessments, right? And what do those assessments do if you get an assessment? It eats into your profit. So you want to prevent, those assessments, right? That, you don't meet the discount requirements. One of the biggest things that I see is address standardization. So how are you disputing address standardization? Another one is barcode. If you're reusing barcodes, you can't, right? You can't reuse the barcode in a certain amount of time, right? So, that's a problem. And sometimes we see that people are reusing those barcodes. So you can't really dispute. So there's very few issues that you could dispute. But yes, you can. Mail piece design issues affecting automation is a big one. I find that a lot of our customers, will get dinged for that. I find that it's software configuration will cause a lot of customers. So again, knowing that software is key.
So if it does get dinged, how long does it take to get back into good standing?
Well, each month you're in a new mailing, right? So that mailer ID will keep this on the 11th, I think it comes out. So it's for the previous month, right? So like I said, you can use that scorecard. You can export it, the data in Excel, right? put a little CSV tab on the bottom, and then do it month over month so that you can see it really is key to the data. Again, there's lots of other ways to do it automated, right? So as I mentioned, your score, you don't need to go through this rigmarole because you can get it automated. But if you really are keeping track and you want to look at it yourself, which, you know, I think is key. Anytime I do a mail assessment, it's the first question I ask. But you know what most people say when I tell them, well, what does your scorecard say? They say, where's that again? And these are mailers. These are people that are doing a lot of mail. Where is that again? Where do I find that? Yeah. And so they don't always have the data that they need.
So if a printer has never looked at this Mailer Scorecard before, they're going to log in, rush to their dashboard after this webinar and log in for the very first time. What is the number one thing that they should be focusing on?
Well, there's actually 5, right? So remember when your kids were little? 5. It's volume information, right? So that's the big one. The second one is full service verifications, right? We all know that those 3 full service verifications. That's a big one. Move update information, right? We want to make sure that, you know, there's thresholds for each one of these, right? So you got to remember there's the USPS creates the thresholds, not me, folks. The 4th is entry point validations, and the 5th is what we call EDOC and nesting validations. Those are the 5 key components for pretty much the 5 major elements of the scorecard that you want to be reviewing, right? And each one of those has a threshold. You can go onto the USPS, you can download their large document, which is, I think, like God only knows how many 100 pages. And it does tell you in there, and in some brief postings on the USPS website, what those thresholds are for each one of these sections. But those are the big ones. Those are the key. Those are the 5.
Awesome. So someone asked, that you touched on ROI a little bit, and they want to know, can you revisit how mailers report back to their customers on the ROI? When you're pulling all of this information out of your Mailer Scorecard on the ROI of an individual campaign, how do you go back and get that back to the end user, the ultimate customer?
Yeah, it's a great question. Did that come in from Brandon?
Yeah.
Yeah, Brandon, great question. Tools that do this, right? So I mentioned one earlier on, there's campaign management tools, right? If you're using a campaign management tool, there's great tools that can help pull that and also provide a dashboard, which makes it really easy to see all of this, right? Because there's a code on there, and there's the dashboard that continues to monitor. And sometimes what you'll find is you're doing a little print with a little digital now, right? So we're not only really doing the print. So those tools are really helpful, right? There's tools like Acrylics, which I mentioned earlier on. Acrylics, which we sell in our marketing services group, just so happens, don't have anything to do with Acrylics, but we do sell the tool. The reality is these tools help you with that whole buying journey. So some of them, who do you think the first person that adopted tools like this was? And you're going to laugh when I tell you. The cruise ship. Cruise ships were one of the first ones to be able to adopt these types of tools, right? They want to know how you're going to buy your cruise, right? Because it helps them be more knowledgeable in the way that they position. And that goes back to one of the earlier slides, is measurable success, right? Being able to fill that out. But these tools are really helpful. Now, if you're trying to do this through, let's say, just your own codes that you're putting on there, it can get tough. It's harder. You can do it, but it would be a much more manual process. But then with tools like Claude or ChatGPT, you can use good prompts to be able to build a little bit more of an aggregated report out. And then, of course, you would be doing it much more manually. But if you're really doing campaigns, campaign management tools are your best key.
So we have one that looks like Amy wants to know, do you have any tools that you can recommend for training and educating clients on how to maximize their list? You touched on training for staff, but what tools can they be pointing customers at?
Yeah, well, I will say Ricoh, or I should say the business consulting practice, not Ricoh as a whole, is creating a postal literacy training program. And that is going to be to help educate, customers, because customers need that education. We also can help with them through doing customized trainings for customers, so we do offer that service. But it is difficult because, you do have to understand the customer's business. And it would be very customized to be able to do that, right? How important that is and what they're doing is really key to how we train our customers, right? So we do offer that coming soon. We have a digital literacy program that we offer customers today. That's more about design. But when we get into postal literacy, we will have a more formalized program coming out probably sometime in 2026 that will offer customers. But through the consulting group, we can help create a more customized training program with standard operating procedures that you can supply the customer, because it's great to train them. But what we find is unless they have an SOP, they forget very quickly, conveniently. So that's key.
So, I mean, a lot of this, it's, obviously postal there's a lot that goes into it. So what would you recommend for smaller operations that don't have a dedicated mail staff, but they still want to optimize, they still want to take advantage of all of these discounts and training and all of that out there?
Yeah. So for that, I think it's going to be more of a strategic approach, right? If you're a smaller mailer, I mean, you need to combine some automation tools, right? Because you don't have the resources that the larger organizations do, but you still want to capture the work. So you got to do that with selective outsourcing, right? Because at the end of the day, you want to outsource those complex tasks. And then obviously, there's some smart ways to go about that. So I don't know if anyone on here has ever heard of EDDM. EDDM is a great resource for smaller mailers. I see far too few of them using it. So you don't need postal knowledge for EDDM. The lists are, there's no really address list required for EDDM, right? There's significant savings with using EDDM. And if it's a targeted smaller mailing, why not use it, right? EDDM is great. I would say use cloud-based validation tools. You won't have to have as much postal knowledge if you use cloud-based tools, right? So, you automate CAS, you automate the NCOA processing. You don't need in-house expertise required that the larger, print and mail houses have, Standardize your templates, right? Because that's key, right? You want to have standardized templates. You don't want to have, so having a good tool to be able to standardize those templates, and Ricoh can help with that. I mean, obviously, your onboarding a customer should be simple, right? You don't want to have constant back and forth. So standardize a lot of those templates. And then fourth, I would say, if I had to think about what would be kind of the fourth one, maybe being able to, invest, I guess, in the training, right? Being able to get more postal knowledge for the fewer folks that you do have. So understanding those postal promotions is really helpful to be able to educate and see where you qualify, right? Because even though you're a small shop, if you're growing, why are you not part of the growth incentive?
Makes sense. So how should printers then measure their success? If they're implementing these strategies, they're optimizing, what KPIs matter the most?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think there's a few that I think would be, kind of measurable, right? So there's certain things you want to track monthly, right? So I would say kind of financial KPIs you'd want to track monthly. So track the dollar amounts month over month, towards what you're doing, right? So that's important, right? Postal discounts, making sure to capture those rates on the postal discounts. So calculate the percentage of your available discounts with what you've actually earned, right? So that's key. Being able to compare your costs against your standard rates, right? So what's your cost per mail piece, right? Being able to look at that is key, right? I think part of that is probably going to be the fastest way to look at how you're performing, and then how your improvement, right? That continuous improvement. So those are really what I would say. Tracking that monthly, the dollar amounts month over month is really key.
So I guess as we're kind of reaching toward the end, so I guess it's kind of the final question: what is the low-hanging fruit that printers can tackle this month to improve their overall postal performance?
Well, I would have to go back to your scorecard, right? Because that's key, right? So being able to look at that scorecard, and review it, right? It'll take you 30 minutes, right? Look at that scorecard, see the different areas that you participate in. Obviously, it's going to say 0, 0 if you're not participating in it. So it may be very quicker than that, depending on what you're doing and how you're doing it. But if you're outsourcing also and they're using the mid, remember, you can also see how your vendors are doing as well. So that's good as well, right? Because we can also see the performance of the vendor and whether they're running their due diligence through any of the mailings that you're sending out. If you're in an organization that they're using it in different departments, you're looking at, and you're really the mailer, you're the implant. Why are they doing their own mailings? They should be sending it to you, right? So that's another way to look at it, right? So you say, hey, why is Joan in the office sending out 2,000 pieces hand stuffing when I could be doing that for her? So, capture that information so that you can go back and get to Joan in the office and make sure. Or I see this a lot in universities, by the way, where they're using that same mid in all these different departments, but they've got a great printing and mailing right there, and they're not using it, right? So they're not, two hands are not shaking with one another.
Awesome. Well, we have had an incredible session with a lot of insights, and it has definitely been a lot. So thank you, Heather, and thank you everyone for joining us today. And we'd like to remind everyone that this webinar has been brought to you by Printing Impressions and Implant Impressions, Printing United Alliance Media Brands, and made possible by Ricoh. If you are not yet familiar with the Alliance, we invite you to explore the many resources we provide to support your success in the printing and graphic arts industry by visiting printing.org. And be sure to check out our webinar page to get information on all of our archived and upcoming webinars, including this one, if you want to go back through and catch those slides and some of the conversation that you might have missed. So thank you, everyone. Finally, if you would take a minute to fill out the brief feedback survey that's going to appear on your screen next, it is much appreciated because it will help shape future webinars. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.